hundreds of users on your SQL pool at once, but each one of them individually requires relatively fewer resources. So those are the types of optimization decisions that you can make. So from here, we've talked about some optimization, some loading, some performance, and I want to make sure that we have time to talk about security and some of the features going on in there that allow you to control who has access, not just to a table, but even to individual rows and columns within that table. So for this, we'll go back to our Knowledge Center, same as before. Go to our gallery again, SQL scripts. We should all be pretty familiar with this by now. And now we're going to go to our dynamic data masking for dedicated SQL pools. Dynamic data masking is a really powerful feature for helping to limit sensitive data exposure without affecting the types of queries and reports that those non-privileged users can run. Same as before, select our existing SQL pool, get our script auto-generated, give ourselves a bit more room here. And so once again, there's a lot going on, but we're going to step through this script piece by piece to see what happens. So the first thing here is that we're going to create a new table for this, just to have some fresh data to work with. We're creating our membership table, and this table has 5 columns here: our identity, first name, last name, phone, email. And our first name, phone, and email columns are each getting a masking function put on top of them. And it's this masking function will actually obscure some of that data based off of the specific function to any user that doesn't have the appropriate permissions. So in this case, our first name has a mask function, which will be a partial mask. And then we're using our default mask for the phone and our email mask for the email. So we have the ability to kind of do these custom partial mask functions, as well as having some default ones for really common private information like an email. So we'll run this to create our table with our columns and our masking functions. And then from here, we're going to insert just a couple dummy values into this table. So you can see we've got some names and some personal information. And then now let's query that table. And so you can see here that, as the admin, and I'm sure if you're running this yourself, you probably have full owner permissions. We have permissions to see everything in that table. We have these unmasked privileges by default. So now let's create a new user who has significantly less permissions. We'll create this user and grant select to them, just a test user with very minimal permissions. They really only have the ability to select on that specific table. So now if we go and we actually execute the query as that user, you'll see that our masking functions are now in place and operational. So our partial mask is only showing us the first letter of the first name. Our default mask just goes to a default XXXX. And then our email mask automatically just gives you the first letter as well as the end of the email and the at. It maintains the format while masking the actual information. And so you can already see that this is a very useful thing to do in some specific cases. We're still returning the full table, and that way no functions, all of that will still return the correct information if it's looking for specific columns or specific member IDs. Maybe we only allow users to search by last name. We're not really breaking your average user's ability to get to that data. We're just obscuring the sensitive parts of it. And you'll see how that works in contrast with our row level security in a bit, which can be used to completely hide that row from even showing up in the first place. So different use cases for both of them. From here, you also have the ability to alter these functions on the fly. So you can see we're going to add a new masking function to the last name to just show us the first 2 letters. We run as that user and it's immediately applied. We can only see the first 2 letters of the last name. And we can even update that again. We can change that last name function to be our default function. So when we go back and query, you're only going to be able to see our default 4-letter masking as well over that last name. And so you can just see how simple that is just to manage these privileges. And then the way that you grant these the ability to see this data or not is through the unmask privilege. So just by granting unmask to our test user, going back and running that same query, you can see our test user is now able to see all of the information